I'm Richard Dodd, and you're listening to the Ecology Academy podcast. This is a show where we get to talk and learn about all things ecological, including interviews with top ecologists, both employers and employees, those working with ecologists, and also aspiring and inspiring career-seeking individuals setting out to make a difference. The show aims to provide you with insights, advice, and inspiration to help you succeed and excel as an effective ecologist and to make a real difference to our natural environment. Today I'm speaking with Greg Pilley, who is the Managing Director of Stroud Brewery based in Gloucestershire. He's an adventurer, environmentalist, and beer lover. Now, Greg's worked with the Soil Association for 5 years, principally as project coordinator for the Cultivating Communities project, which promoted and supported the development of community-supported agriculture. He's also founding member of Stroud Community Agriculture, a community cooperative which runs its own farm business, a director of Stroud Commonwealth, which supports social enterprise and community-based asset management. So, Greg, welcome to the Ecology Academy podcast.
Hi, Richard, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, it's really, I'm really pleased to have you on this show, particularly as it's March and it's B Corp month, isn't it?
It is first day.
First day of the month, and happy St. David's Day to you. So as we start with these shows, it's a sort of quick fire questions to you, Greg, and so you don't get away with this, regardless of whether you're an ecologist or not, you still get these quick fire questions. So you ready to start?
Go on, give it a go. I haven't prepared.
I don't think you can prepare. I mean, I do the most preparation for this bit, so don't worry about it. You should be all right. No right or wrong answers. So, first question, very simple: plants or animals?
Oh, that's very tricky. I would go animals.
Animals. Okay, good. Birds or mammals then? To delve a little bit deeper into that.
Mammals. Yeah,
people say dogs or cats, but I sort of take it down the birds or mammals route. And then we go split range. Okay, excellent. Favorite hop varieties at the moment?
Oh, well, it's hard not to like the American hops, and we've just done a sort of session parallel with various hops. We're limited by our organic hops, so what we get to use. But we have a beer with Idaho in at the moment, which is very nice. Yes, I would struggle to pin my colours to a single hop there.
That's It is quite challenging, really, to pick I say just one hop. You could better multiple ones there. I do like your mosaic one there.
Yes.
That's a really good one. Now you may struggle with this one. If you have a superpower, any superpower you like, okay, regardless of what it is, what would it be? And probably more importantly, how would you use it?
Gosh, I think right now we need a bit of world peace. And I think if I could have a superpower that brought loving kindness, I think that's what we could all do, a bit more of that bit of compassion and loving kindness. I don't know if that's such a superpower exists, but we could certainly do with it.
Well, it tends to be in short supply, so I imagine it is some sort of superpower then if people do have it. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you there. And okay, on a lighter question then. So if you had to choose, would you spend your guilt-free time either reading a book, watching a film, or dancing? You can choose another one if you wish.
Yes, no, I actually love watching a movie. Yeah. I really quite happily idle my time away watching some terrible movies, but I really enjoy the just switching off to that and the fantasy of a movie.
What was the last one you watched?
Sitting down reading a book, I'm just cannot concentrate on it. So
no, yeah. What was the last movie or film you saw then, Greg? Yeah, can you remember?
What did I watch that's sort of most recent? I watched a great film called The Green Book, which was about a guy who drives a black musician into the South, and a story about that, which is a true story. Yeah, which is really, really good film.
Oh, right. I haven't seen that one. I asked people these questions, and they give me references. They give me sort of recommendations. I should follow some of these up, really. So I'll look out for the Green Book then. Thanks for that.
Really good film.
And finally, you'd be pleased to hear is which country, in your opinion, produces some of the best beers?
Well, I mean, the UK has got to be quite up there, but I love a Belgian beer. I mean, I like the complexity, the strength, and the fact that they're very malty. You know, that they're sort of malt forward. It's not about the hops, which we've got quite used to, and the sort of hop character. But those Belgian beers are really championing the malt and the complexity that comes with it. So I think, yes, Belgian beers are amongst my favorite sipping beers.
Sipping beer, yeah, because your beers are, I suppose, malt forward as well, aren't they? I mean, well, in my humble.
Yeah, they tend to be. So we use Warminster maltings largely. They're floor malted. The conversion is not always perfect. You end up with some residual sweetness. So our beers tend to have a bit more body, a bit more sweetness, which gives them balance. And I certainly rather not have a very bitter beer. I'm always fighting with my brewers to reduce bitterness. And actually, I think as easy drinking beers, so, you know, we make beers that people want to drink and keep coming back to, rather than a little sipping beer that is sort of quite an experience, you know, initially, but then, you know, you might end up at the end of the can and think you don't want to go back to that again. It's sort of an interesting taste experience, but maybe not so much a drinking beer.
Okay. Now, obviously, I was going to say, we mentioned at the start of this, it is B Corp month in March, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. And obviously, you know, we share the fact that we are both B Corps ourselves. But before we get into that, let's talk about yourself, your sort of journey into before establishing Stroud Brewery. Then, so a little bit about your background and how you came to form the brewery itself.
Yes. As a teenager, sort of early years, I spent holidays and earned cash working on several local farms. So I was introduced into sort of UK agriculture in my teens, grain carting and general sort of farm manual work. And then on finishing university, I also paid off the small uni debt at that time, working on a local farm. My university course was actually in ecology. I specialized in marine biology in the end, but then didn't continue in marine biology. I sort of remained fairly terrestrial after that. And again, that was influenced by my farming experience. I did a bit of work in the UK with English Nature at the time, doing chalk grassland surveys and some local work, sort of early work experience. And then I ended up in Nigeria as a VSO, a volunteer service overseas, and that was managing a conservation project in the north of Nigeria. And again, it was working with local people, looking at how they could influence the management of their land and landscape. So sort of after that, returning to the UK, I had various options, but ended up working with the Soil Association in Bristol, who certify organic products. But I was working in their charitable part, and that was with their local food team. So that local food team was looking at how to shorten supply chains, what the models were that existed for that. And that was in, you know, sort of pre-2000, where actually local food still wasn't really a thing. You know, the first farmers market was around 2002, I believe, the modern farmers market as we know them. So it was still quite a struggle to find regular local food. So things like box schemes, and in fact, I started there as a volunteer investigating the few box schemes that existed and wrote their technical guide on how to set up a box scheme and run a viable business out of it. And then continue to do another feasibility on a concept known as community supported agriculture, which is a concept that was coming out of the States and really was exploring a range of partnerships that supported local farms, largely in that transition from producing commodity goods into food for local people. And those arrangements might be financial or time or just a commitment, but lots of different ways that farmers could start producing food for local people. And as you mentioned in my introduction, that's really what brought me to Stroud. There was a project here that was exploring just that. A dairy farm that had a local milk round, and the farmer was burning out, and the community rallied round to see how they might support that little enterprise. As it happened, the farmer did decide to stop, and it didn't continue as a dairy enterprise, but that group went on to set up Stroud Community Agriculture, renting land and setting up a vegetable growing scheme that now runs a small, diverse little farm, employing a couple of full-time farmers and more volunteers, and supplying over 250 households with weekly veg and meat and lots of activity. So really interesting, and a model that's now gone on for over 20 years, since which is the time I've been in Stroud. So when I did arrive in Stroud, I had an ecology background. I had been indoctrinated by the Soil Association around organic farming and local supply chain, and I wanted to bring those things into my own business. And I'd long had an interest in beer, and I think that was partly through sort of an expatriate upbringing and how beer and a barbecue was very central to social life, but also with a real interest in how people do come together around a beer and how community is made. And being fairly itinerant in my past, arriving in a foreign town, I sort of needed a sense of purpose and a reason for being here in this community. And the brewery brought all those things together. So yes, it's very much about having a business that met the needs of local people, but also did its best to do well in terms of localization and the way that we grow our food.
Right. So what's time scale are we here? So I say you moved around a bit. You said there. So in terms of establishing yourself in Stroud itself, probably is it late 90s or?
I moved to Stroud in 2002, and the brewery started in 2006. So it took 4 years for me to establish the brewery, and it was actually whilst weeding a carrot field with a fellow beer enthusiast, we sort of said, wouldn't it be great if Stroud had a brewery? And I was possessed, and it took 2 years then to put it into being. And I managed to find a small unit not far from home, which we knocked about, and I had a Heath Robinson little brewery set, fabricated again just around the corner. Stroud's full of engineering workshops and fabricators, so we got their kit made locally, and started brewing in June 2006, which is the same year that Brewdog started their enterprise, although went in a very different trajectory.
That's it. Yeah. We may mention Brewdog, but then again we may not during this conversation. Maybe we'll take that off air slightly there. But okay. So setting up the brewery in 2006, and what's different about your brewery then compared to any other brewery, or not? To most breweries within sort of the UK market then.
Yeah. So most breweries do the very similar thing. In fact, as a tradition, it's gone on for thousands of years, and the actual basic method of making beer is exactly the same. Beer's made out of grain, whatever that grain might be. So when I was in Nigeria, we were drinking Burukutu beer, which was made out of sorghum and guinea corn, but it was beer. It was sort of out of a malted grain. So on that basis, it's pretty similar. We made a commitment to try using local malt. So I mentioned Warminster Maltings. They're 35 miles away. Warminster's owned by Robin Appel, whose principal business is negotiating a price with the farmers and contracting those crops. And if they meet the standard, he buys those crops. And the best of it, he now puts into his craft maltings, Warminster Maltings, and that gets sold across the UK and indeed all over the world. But because they control that supply from farm to brewery, they can guarantee the provenance of that grain. And we have an agreement that our grain comes from around the Cotswolds. So most of it's about 10 to 15 miles radius from the brewery, and largely around Cirencester, which is some really great barley growing countryside. So the Cotswolds have got valleys, but the tops of their flat plateaus are well draining and perfect for growing arable crops. So that was one of the main differences. In 2008, in the sort of first recession, we looked at how we diversify our sales. And one of the things we started doing was bottling beers. And we made the decision at that point that all our bottled products would be organic beers. Again, I wanted to brew organically from the start. The market pubs didn't pay the premium. It was a bit more difficult to do. But we made the decision that in bottles, we could differentiate. So from 2008, we were brewing organic beers. So yes, brewing using local ingredients and organic beers. And 5 years ago now, we became a dedicated organic brewery, meaning that all the beers that we produce are based on organic ingredients. And why the delay? Well, I mentioned the pubs. I mean, pubs historically paid on alcohol content, and it was just a formula and didn't really allow differentiation between beers. The craft beer movement has altered that, and I think people agree that not all beers are equal. And in that, as well as ingredients, actual values and production methods come into the decision making around why you might purchase a beer. So those premiums do change, and that's allowed a bit of flexibility, and we can get some of the cost back, the margins that we need. But in general, organic production gives us limited choice of ingredients, especially hops. They cost more by up to 50% in some cases. And the market isn't really that flexible enough or elastic enough to accommodate those prices. So we operate at reduced margins on our products. And why would we do that? It's because we feel it's the right thing to do. In terms of our business, if we're looking at, the biggest impact we could make, really, our main raw ingredients or our main raw materials are barley and hops, and therefore we should be looking at how best to produce those for our products. But surprisingly, or maybe not surprising, there's only 5 or 6 breweries in the UK from a total of over 2,500 breweries that are dedicated to organic brewing. And I think the main reason is that economically it doesn't really stack up as well.
Right, I see. So yeah, so and you made that, as you say, you've stuck, well, not stuck, but you deem that organic is the way forward for yourselves, and you say it's more of a sustainable product in the end. So whether it be those those profit margins are smaller at the end of the day, I bet you would compromise on anything going forward then, really, in terms of
It was a difficult decision because certainly you make more margin using conventional non-organic inputs, but we found it very difficult to say these are all the benefits of our organic products, but if you want, you can have this other stuff that isn't quite so good for planet or you. Whereas we wanted to be endorsing the benefits of organic agriculture. And I don't know if this is time, but to sort of list some of those benefits. Why would we do it? Obviously, organic agriculture is very much about reduced input, so it's not bringing in artificial pesticides or fertilizers. In terms of health, historically, that's one of the main reasons that people might choose organic, is that they didn't want those residues on their crops. But one of the biggest differences is around biodiversity. Again, by not using insecticides and those things, you have far more biodiversity on the farm. And I think the evidence is that there's about 25% more biodiversity on an organic farm than a conventional farm. And then more recently, there's a lot of, we've been talking a lot about carbon and carbon sequestration. And again, organic farms potentially hold far more organic matter in the soils. They rely on the life in the soil. In fact, the principle of organic farming is about managing your soil having as much life in the soil, and from that you will get your crops. So it is about having more carbon in the soil. But when you measure success entirely in terms of carbon, then you are also missing out on things like the biodiversity benefit. The other sort of cost that is not really considered in organic farming is the cost of runoff. So our British waterways spend, in fact, the largest bill, I think, is cleaning up nitrates and phosphates from our waterways as a result of agricultural runoff. I think it's the biggest cost that they face. So in a way, agricultural products are not subsidized by those external costs of loss of biodiversity or water cleanup or health, but they're a true cost of that food. And I think that's what anybody who's sort of involved in sustainable production, whether it's reducing energy costs or whatever it might be, in a way they're removing the sort of subsidies that we've had our food systems propped up by. And our task is to try and communicate those sort of difficult messages and get people sort of valuing that part of their whatever their purchases are.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, as you say, just buy upon price and not necessarily consider the sort of the full impact of a product or a service that they may be may have purchased or using at all, whether it be a subscription-based service or whether it actually be physical products as well. And it's not the full environmental cost. And I think, companies like yourselves and, B corporations in general, I think a lot of people view B Corps as, luxury end sort of products and services when actually they're not. I think we do take the full consideration of the the supply chains into consideration, and the how the real benefits and the costs associated with the businesses we run. It's not just about getting the cheapest product, cheapest material, and then maximizing profits, is it really?
No, exactly. And that was the challenge we faced, even just as an organic brewery, the messages, around the benefits of organic farming, they're quite complex. It's not something you can fit on the side of every can. And the organic movement hasn't done a great job of marketing and promoting organic. There are some negative feelings about it as well, that maybe it's regenerative, it's sort of traditional, it's backwards, whatever. There's sort of misconceptions. So what we faced in trying to market the good things that we were doing. So it's not just about our production, but whether it was raising finance. We raised finance through a succession of crowdfunding activities, most recently with Triodos Bank as a community bond. We capture rainwater off our roof. We use 100% green electricity. We use our building for community events and support local community activities. We actively look at our programming of events to deliberately try and engineer community, getting people together to meet each other that might not have done, to have conversations that are quite topical. So these are all sort of things that we do, but you can't stick them all on the side of a can. So how do you convey those that sort of breadth of activity? Which is why we started looking and came across B Corp as a way of measuring that. So first of all, we wanted to know how well we were doing, what sort of impact were we having, how do you measure and monitor that, and then how do you communicate the good things that you do, and that's exactly what B Corp does stand for. And hopefully increasingly, when people see that symbol, the B Corp B on the side of a pack or on a window, they know that those businesses must have a minimum level of good practice, and therefore are worth supporting and putting in the bag.
Yeah, and I think it cuts across so many levels, doesn't it? As well, it's not just the fact that, as I say, it's recognizing that a business it's not just the end product you're buying or the service you've engaged in. It is how you treat your staff. How you go. What level of community support do you provide? As you say, it comes down to everything you mentioned in Trade Bank there. So who do you bank with, and how do you invest in your pension schemes? All those elements are taken into consideration. And is that something that sort of, as you say, is it something that B Corp has helped you with, or is it something just it's been a natural progression of sort of your ethos as a managing director?
I think both is the answer to that. I think, I certainly had that inclination. That is my background, and I was trying to improve doing what we were hoping to do. What B Corp has done is drilled and sort of exposed how we do business, and by its nature, it's the impact assessment is a multiple choice. There's good practice to best practice. You've got to put a bit of work in to get onto that first rung, but then it's very clear how you can improve. And it just illustrates, it puts best practice in front of you. And so it's a fantastic tool for further improvement, which definitely has helped our business. And it's helped us to think about the way that we structure our business, and looking forward to how to simplify that that assessment of ourselves. And definitely something that we've been trying to communicate all along, of course, is, if people want to live in a better and different world, then you've got to spend your money in the places that are doing things differently. And again, this is a great tool to just say, well, these businesses are doing something differently. And they're for-profit businesses. They're working in the capitalist environment that we're in, but they're doing that business responsibly and trying to do it in a way that isn't a detriment to people and planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're in a similar position that we're very much profit is important to us. Else we we wouldn't be able to employ the wonderful people that we have with us, and also advance, I say, a cause. I think B Corps and a lot of other companies as well. They have a vision and values which they hold close to them, and I think B Corps, more importantly, recognize that. And it's one thing putting it on your wall. It's another thing living, and breathing it as well. And I think that's what we see a little bit of greenwashing going on there with, this buzzword of values, and it's okay putting it on your website. But actually, when it comes to the hard decisions, that's when I think, a true test of character comes in, tests your resolve then when it comes to those vision and values.
Yes, definitely.
In terms of then, I suppose the next stages then, Greg, then in terms of for Stroud Brewery then. So actually, going back one question, you mentioned about the bottles, and then I really noticed now that do you sell bottles anymore, or is it all cans?
We don't. We've completely moved to cans. So lockdown through that challenge into perspective, every brewery in the land wanted to start packaging their products because they couldn't sell through hospitality. Half our income is through our own bar, so we've got a thriving venue and tap house here. But the other half of our income is selling to other breweries, other bars and restaurants and cafes. So, first lockdown was really very difficult for us, and the only way we could sell was remotely in small pack. The lead times went from a couple of weeks to 3 months. We didn't really know what, it was very difficult to forecast. So we looked at how we would package in-house. And in that decision, it was a case of whether we go to bottles or cans. There are hybrid machines, but they don't do the job so well. And the decision was very clearly in favor of cans. And that was largely on the environmental factors. Cans are just far less environmentally costly than bottles. Aluminium is increasingly more recycled. 70 to 80% of the aluminium in the UK is now recycled content. They weigh a fraction of the weight of a bottle. They take up less space. Yes, just far more environmentally friendly. And then for us, when sending beer away, we were losing somewhere between 10 and 15% of the liquid that we were sending away. So again, that was barley grown, transported, malted, turned into beer, and then poured down the drain. So huge saving, and that on its own has paid for, for the machine and the new canning process. Certainly a lot of resistance, or some resistance from customers who like the traditional bottle, feel it's more premium, we're more used to it. The cans have been associated with cheap beer, cheap products. However, the craft beer movement has raised the kudos of the can to some extent. And certainly we found that the product is far improved. There's less intervention. We sort of have an unfiltered product straight into the can, and it for us has improved the product no end. So yeah. We don't regret the decision at all. It's been a great move. And to have control of the product right from the start to the finished product, and allow ourselves to mess it up has been really quite empowering for our brew team.
No, I'm a total convert. I must admit that. So I am a home brewer myself. So I reuse my bottles. They come back to me, and that's okay. But in terms of cans, I just, as you say, they just taste a lot fresher. I don't know if that's psychologically or just it is actually a real effect, but they taste better. The artwork on them is incredible. I think you can get some, a lot better. I mean, visually, they're a lot more appealing than bottles, I think, personally, as well. But it's interesting to say about the sustainability of beer and how it's packaged as well. So we've gone from the bottle to the can, but ultimately, do you think cask as actually also, through lockdowns and so forth, has lost out a little bit, and actually we should really embrace going to pubs and venues where they actually have cask ale on tap?
You come right to the crucial point, and that is absolutely the case. Drinking cask beer is the most environmentally responsible way of drinking beer. The casks that we use, I've had them since we started the brewery, and they're reused over and over again. They get delivered a short distance to a local pub. They're delivered directly, and then they're reused. So yes, I don't know what the figures are. It's something we want to look at, but I think it's probably a quarter of the energy used as in packaging small pack beer and storing it and traveling it around. Cask as well, compared with keg beers, uses far less refrigeration, and refrigeration costs again are a huge part of the cost of both keg and canned products. So traditional cask beer is by far the best way to drink beer in environmental terms. I think another consideration, one of the benefits of drinking in a pub is drinking socially with other people and have a real part to play in building community. So, if we're talking about our sustainable future, I think already people are recognizing that, they want to try and move their or try and create their identities not by spending. So it's not sort of a consumer identity, but much more about a relationship-based identity. You are the people, the friends and the families that you spend your time with. And I think that people recognize that importance. And certainly coming out of the pandemic, people really have valued that family and friend time. So I think the things that we might measure our future on isn't so much about spending and commodity, and also that what matters is around quality of life. So again, not measuring on income or GDP, but the sort of the quality of life around leisure time, around time with family, about time outside, being in the outdoors, appreciating nature, whether it's time growing your own vegetables or learning a craft, which are sort of self-development rather than spending on stuff that we really don't need.
No, totally agree with there. And it's, I think we need to value, I'm sure, I mean, most people listening to this podcast I'm sure will realize the value of the natural environment, what it gives to us, air, food and water and so forth. And say that's that space to connect with people. And I must admit, I love your brewery. I mean, I've, we had our Christmas meal. I mean, we've been there previously to this, but our Christmas meal there, and your staff was so welcoming as well. I mean, it just made the event itself. It's not just about the food, as you say. It's about the people that are there. We made so welcome. The beers are great, obviously, and we'll be back there. I think we're back there in a couple of weeks' time for an event in one of your. I think we're hiring one of your rooms out. We'll be there in a night time as our social. But yeah, I love what you do. So, how can people find out more about your wonderful beers, your wonderful company, brewery, and yourself, then, Greg?
Well, like everybody else, I would say go and look at our website. That's a constant journey for us, improving all the time, but all our events are listed there. You can book tables there. It tells you about our beers and of course our story. If you want to hear the latest news, you can subscribe to a newsletter. And again, we're trying to get much better about that so that we don't bombard everybody with stuff they don't want to hear. But yes, or even better is to come and visit us, of course, as you suggest. If you're anywhere near Stroud, it'd be great to just meet people and come and meet our team here at Stroud Brewery.
Great. Well, Greg Pilley, thank you so much for joining me on the Ecology Academy podcast.
Thank you. Well, have a great B Corp month.
If you enjoy our show and want to help, then please click on the subscribe button and rate us on your favourite podcast player, as that's how you can inspire ecologists in the making, help retain great talent, and provide insights of our industry to a much wider audience of why ecology really does matter. Thank you. And remember, learning is a lifelong endeavour, so stay curious, be adventurous, and build bridges for others to cross.